Hi everyone. Thank you for staying after quite a long and interesting day of panels. I would like to welcome my panelists and give them the floor to introduce themselves to you and talk a little bit about their experience before we dig deeper into the panel. I just want to say that this panel is going to be in Arabic and English. The questions to Nasser will be in Arabic, so if you need translation, please keep your headsets close to you. أهلا وسهلا أستاذ ناصر، تخبرنا لو سمحت بس عن حالك شوي وعن دورك في المؤسسة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ناصر التميمي، مدير إدارة التراخيص الإعلامية في المجلس الوطني للإعلام. طبعا المجلس الوطني للإعلام هو الجهة المنظمة لإصدار التراخيص الإعلامية لكافة المؤسسات الإعلامية حكومية أو خاصة تمارس الأنشطة الإعلامية بكافة مستوياتها، من صحف، مجلات، من بث إذاعي، بث تلفزيوني، من إعلام إلكتروني، أيضا ترخيص للمحلات التي تمارس الأنشطة الإعلامية داخل الدولة مثل المكتبات، دور السينما، أيضا تصاريح، موضوع اللي بنتكلم عليه اليوم تصاريح التصوير، أيضا من إدارة التراخيص الإعلامية المجلس الوطني إدخال معدات التصوير. يعني هذا بشكل ملخص دور إدارة التراخيص اللي هو دور وجزء من دور المجلس الوطني للإعلام.
Hi everybody, I'm Fiona Robertson. I'm a media and entertainment lawyer. I've been working in the entertainment industry as a lawyer for about 25 years. So hopefully I'll be able to answer all your questions today.
Hi, my name's Hana Makki. I am a producer by trade. I began as an independent filmmaker and kind of worked my way up through production and started with Imagination when the documentary department opened. I began there working on a film called As One, and then have slowly worked my way up, and now I'm the head of documentary at Nation Abu Dhabi.
Thank you very much. This panel actually, it's very interesting because it talks about an issue, a real issue in the Arab world. The legal aspect of filmmaking is a region-specific somehow problem for different reasons. One of them maybe is the Arab region, and people in the Arab world might look at signing an agreement with someone as a sign of mistrust. So especially for upcoming filmmakers, young people, they work with their families, their friends, and they start a project together. They don't think about this aspect. This is one thing. And the other part is the misconception about the role is a lawyer is really needed. Where do I find these lawyers? How much does it cost? And all of these issues. So to start from the basics, I would like Fiona to talk to us about the role of a media and entertainment lawyer, and at what stage the involvement of a lawyer in a film production is key and important.
I just want to start off by saying there's an awful lot of people in the world who make films, and that's terrific, and obviously, you know, the encouragement of creativity, I'm all for that. If you want to be in the film business, however, you have to be very focused on the fact that the word film is there, but so is the word business. And business is a commercial enterprise. So if you're going to be making a film that you want people to see in a commercial way rather than just on your rooftop sitting around on a big screen, if you want to commercially exploit your film, then you need to think about that from day one. Because the very first thing that you're going to be doing is finding out a storyline that you're going to be basing your film on. And you need to make sure from that first day that you're getting the rights that you need in order to distribute it. When you're looking at a film from the very beginning, you have to have your eye on that end game. What am I going to do with this? Am I just going to show it in the cinema? Do I just want to have a YouTube? Or am I really looking at a full commercial exploitation of the film? And if that's what you're thinking about doing, that very first contract has to have that in mind. Because if you want to do, for example, US distribution of your film, you need to know that a US distributor isn't even going to look at your film unless you can give an entire box of signed contracts that have proper copyright releases in there, proper waivers in there, all the proper credit terminology. It all has to be in there or they won't accept your film. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind. As far as what the lawyer can do, well, we can do anything. We can start you on that journey with the proper contract so that if you are going to make a film that's going to make $1 million, that you get the $1 million. That's a really important part of all of this. So you can start with us very, very early. We always like to be in there early. Even if you haven't got the money to pay us straight away, it's always good to come and talk to us anyway, so you at least get a strategy as to how you're going to get your rights and how you're going to build the business that will become this film.
Thank you very much. Moving to Hana, and if you like, about media lawyers. Media lawyers in the Arab world are a niche, right? You mentioned that in our communication.
Yeah.
So filmmakers might say, okay, I need a lawyer, but where do I find this person? What kind of credentials do I look for? How much do I pay this person? Is it going to cost me a lot of money? Then all of this has to be thought about in advance. So it would be good if you can talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think generally, especially first-time filmmakers, are generally very intimidated by the idea of getting a lawyer. And I totally agree with Fiona. Media and entertainment law is not only a niche, but lawyers are like doctors. They are specialists only in their area. So not just any lawyer is going to be able to help you. Just because your uncle's whatever is a real estate lawyer, it doesn't mean they're going to be able to help you in your film. I think another intimidating thing, so you have to look at the background. You have to look at where this lawyers work, what they specialize in. Are they a media and entertainment lawyer? Maybe they only specialize in copyright. I mean, there are various things. Also recommendations from other filmmakers who have distributed their projects, who have used a lawyer in the region is always a good place to go. I also think the relationship between the filmmaker and lawyer is an important one to think about. Most first-time filmmakers are very ignorant about law, and just like going to a doctor, you think, okay, maybe I'll leave it all to the lawyer. But I think Fiona said a very important point is you have to think about the goals of your film. Who do you want to see it? Where do you want it to go? And really that relationship between you and the lawyer should be an equal one. You are the creative, you're in the business of filmmaking. And so don't be intimidated because there's a lot of jargon on a contract that you don't understand. It's your film. The lawyer is a support network, really, to the business of filmmaking. But the filmmaker is really the leader of that business. Just as finance or administration, these are support networks to the business of filmmaking. So I think it's important to remember your role and not just let it go all to the lawyer. In terms of, you mentioned cost, it really depends on, again, what Fiona was saying, where the film's going to go and what you want to do with it. But let's say you're making a short film or your first-time feature film. There isn't really a lot of archive material. The basic agreements you would want are probably with your creative crew, your director of photography or your sounds or some basic crew agreements, maybe some release forms. I work in documentary, so it's location release permits and release forms of the participants who you're filming. What kind of budget? Well, you're kind of looking at about maybe 1.5% to 2% of your budget. That's what you want to budget, put in your budget for your legal. And then a lot of lawyers are going to turn around and say to you, okay, we all go on hourly rates, right? Now, that's very intimidating because how many hours are we going to work on this? So what I would advise is try and negotiate a fixed rate. Try and, the first agreement you're going to do, and I had to learn this the hard way, but the first agreement you're going to do with your lawyer is one between you and your lawyer, right? So at that point, you're at different sides of the table. You're not on the same side of the table, right? So that's something to remember. So what you want to do in that first agreement is say, okay, I want all the production agreements that I'm going to need to start this film off, and I want it at a fixed rate. And sometimes, Fiona here is a very senior lawyer, she'll have a high hourly rate, but she might have a team working under her, a junior lawyer or a paralegal who are helping her draft those agreements. So you might be able to even ask for a blended rate. Can I have a discounted blended fixed rate to get all of these agreements done? And maybe you can even ask, hey, can I put in one distribution deal in that package for when my film is done, because that's when the real contracts and the real work start happening. So they're the type of things I would suggest.
Yeah, lawyers we're always happy to negotiate. That is what we do for a living. So we're always happy to negotiate. And I think if for example you are doing a film where you might have 2 financiers coming in, and maybe you've got a distributor in mind already, so there will be a distribution agreement. And if you're going to say to me, I need the 2 finance documents and the distribution agreement done, I'm going to give you some crew agreements. I'm going to give you some cast agreements, because you're going to give me some really good value work, and I'll be like, look, there's some templates, go off, you fix them, you look after them, that's fine. We're always going to be open to negotiation. You know what your budget is, we know what you're trying to achieve, and between the 2 of us, we can always work something out.
Thank you. That's really exciting, the debate between you ladies. So let's go back to even like more basics. I would like to divide the legal responsibilities of a film producer into 3 stages: the pre-production, the production, and post, and talk about a bit about documentary, about fiction, and also about permits. So let's start with a script, okay? There is, for example, a writer-director, first-time writer-director, or even second time, looking for a producer. They have this idea. What is the right, like legally, for this person to protect their idea? What shall they do? From a copyright point of view, also if you can tap into another option, which is basically a producer who wants to option a book. This is another thing that if you can tell us a little bit about in terms of the legal aspect. Starting from the
you take writer, I'll take book.
No, I'm documentary. It's not
documentary.
Area I do.
Okay, with the creatives that you're copyright is a really difficult area of law, because it can be less instinctive than you want it to be. So, for example, if you're going to come up with an idea for a film, you've got to understand that the protection of that idea in and of itself is not going to be easy to do. What you have to do is find things that are more layered. So you've got then to get down to character breakdowns and the storyline, and then you're going into scripting. Once you get into scripting, I've got more that I can protect for you. There's more meat on those bones. I can protect that in a much easier way. In the UAE and in various jurisdictions in this part of the world, you can register scripts and you can register copyright material. But what you need to know is that doesn't give you the copyright protection. It just registers whatever rights you have. So if you don't have any rights, i.e. it's not a fully formed idea, it's not original, whatever other reason, there's not enough of it, that copyright registration is not going to give you more rights than you have. So that's a really important thing to know, because I know that a lot of people go off and they say, well, I registered it. It's like, yes, but what you registered was rubbish, so there's no point in registering that. Rubbish in, rubbish out. It's the same rule. What it does do is date stamp it, though. So what it is you put the registration in, and it says, on the 1st of April, you registered that. So if somebody comes along 2 years later with a very similar idea, you can prove that you had it first. So that can be extremely helpful in the litigation and negotiation process. There is also a registration process in the US that can be really helpful for writers. You go through the Library of Congress from memory. That's a great registration system, particularly if you are aiming for the US market, because if you aren't registered as a foreign national, you don't have as many rights in the US. So make sure you look into that if you're thinking about that. Scripts need contracts, must have contracts. So I think the relationship between the writer-director and the producer is a really important one, and it's really, really important to get it very clear. There's a lot of arguments that come out of these very early relationships that don't get well formed. Really important to be clear. Who's got creative control? Is the writer going to do the rewrites? Yes or no? Do you really want them to direct, or do you want someone else's vision to come in? How many rewrites am I going to do? Am I a writer? Am I a director? Am I both? Profit share. What's going to come down to profit share? Who's responsible for finding finance? Both of you? If so, how? What happens if you cross over each other? Who's going to take the lead? All of these questions have to be thought about now, answered as much as possible in a contract. Or at least write something down for me, if you could. Anything, just write something. It would be great. Emails would be helpful. Optioning books are really difficult. It's quite complex because copyright can be very thinly sliced. I think you might have seen it for those of you that have worked in any audiovisual and you've seen the way we sell it. We can sell online for 3 years in Turkey. We can slice it that thinly as far as media, term and territory goes. So when it comes to books and optioning, then we've got that thing is, who's going to get the book? Okay, it's going to stay with the publisher. I'm going to make the film. What if there's a sequel? What if there's a book sequel? What about a television show? Who gets merchandising? Do I get merchandising because my film? Or do you keep merchandising because you had the book first? These are the sort of questions that need to be answered within the option agreement. And options have two aspects to them. One is I would like to pay a small amount of money, like $1,000, and I would like to have 18 months to try and sell this as a film. But what happens when I want to pick up the option? How much am I going to pay you? What role do you have? What role do I have? Do you get to be part of the film? Are you an executive producer? Do you get a cut? And all of that has got to be in that very first document. So that can be quite a complex document to do.
Thank you. Would you like to tap into documentary?
Pre-production?
For pre-production.
Yeah, sure. So with documentary and pre-production, I mean, the important thing to think about is usually with documentary, it's very different because you're then a film because there isn't necessarily a writer. There isn't necessarily, a script. The creatives that you're dealing with a crew, and then you're actually dealing with somebody's life. And you might not even be paying that person. So, and documentaries usually have much lower budgets. And so with pre-production with documentary, really it's about that personal release form. And I think an important thing to remember is with this personal release form, you're saying to somebody usually what a legal template would be is saying they can use their image and their voice, as Fiona tapped upon, that you are allowed to use their image and their voice in any format that you wish. So it could be you're going to put that image online. It could be that you're going to put it on in the cinemas. You're going to put it in the festivals that you might want it worldwide. A release that covers worldwide, and you might want it in perpetuity, which means forever, pretty much as time goes on. So, but then there's different release forms where you would say, limit that and say, actually, my film is only going to be in the Middle East, and I'm only going to show it for broadcast in the Middle East. So your contracts and agreements really depend on where you want to show it, and that's what we're talking about in goals, figuring out where you want to show it, who you want to show it to, and how you want to show it. That's something to think about. I think an important thing for documentary filmmakers to remember is that as documentarians, we work in a world because we're dealing with real people, is we really think about the ethics a lot, and our commitment to our subject, right? Whether it's a person or whether it's a cause. We generally, as documentarians, have a long-term relationship with that, and we care about it. And that is hard when it comes to legal because, and this is not any comment, but the legal field isn't documentary field. It's not a bunch of creatives caring about a cause. It's the legal field is people. Lawyers are there to think about the worst case scenario, right? They're there to think about the worst case scenario. So I think it's an important thing for filmmakers to remember, actually, documentary filmmakers to remember. When you're going in and dealing with your lawyer for the first time, it can be an experience where you're like, whoa, that's not going to happen. I get on with this person. But again, the lawyer is there to think about the worst case scenario, think about the long term, bring in those questions, and it's a relationship you have to navigate because sometimes you don't want all that harsh wording in the contract with this wonderful person who's giving up their life and children for you to film. So as a filmmaker, it's important to remember you have to navigate that relationship. You want to protect the film, you want to be able to take it elsewhere, but you also have a big commitment to your subjects, which is not the lawyer's job to do. So again, it's really a partnership, and don't just give up everything for the lawyer to do.
I've seen so many emails in response to my draft releases, and they come back with absolute, how dare you? This lawyer, who are you dealing with? What is she? And it's really, I just want to say that because it's so common. It's that feeling of the mistrust comes in because the document has been provided. And when you get to that point where you have to provide a document and you're not comfortable with it, there are two things I would suggest. Firstly, do go back to your lawyer and discuss whether or not all of those elements are necessary for your film. And has it been written in? We can write very harshly. As lawyers, we do write quite bluntly. And sometimes we forget how legal and official we sound, or officious, as my mother would say. So we can soften language. Go and have a talk to your lawyer. And the second thing is to really emphasize to the person on the other side, to the person who's going to be signing this release, that this is not about the relationship. This is about the project. That there's no reflection on the relationship within that documentation. It just has to be done so you can distribute the project.
Just quickly add, sorry, I just thought of something. I think, especially for first-time filmmakers, as Fiona said, the writing is not reflective of the relationship. The filmmaker has to own that. Now, again, when you are navigating your relationship with your lawyer for the first time, I think when they give you that template, I don't think there's anything wrong once you've established your fixed rate and not hourly rate. But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking the time, read through every single agreement, sit with your lawyer, get them a coffee and say, okay, I don't understand this clause, I don't understand this clause, I don't understand this clause. And make sure you understand everything that is said on it. Make sure it's told to you in layman's terms, because then you can go to your actor or your subject who you're filming in documentary or to then go and explain it to them, because you need to be on their side. So that's
في سؤال هلا لناصر. في كتير صناع أفلام إماراتيين أو مقيمين في الإمارات وحابين يصوروا الفيلم الأول إلهم وما بيعرفوا شو هي العملية اللي لازم يروحوا فيها من أجل الحصول على تصريح تصوير في الإمارات. وكمان في شيء هو مميز بالإمارات إنه مش كل public space هو تابع، خلينا نقول public أو حكومي. هو في كتير خلينا نقول أماكن تعتبر منطقة عامة بس هي فعلياً ملك خاص، فتصاريحها ممكن تكون مختلفة. فإذا بتحكي لنا عن البروسيس أو الطريقة اللي بيتاخد فيها التصاريح في الإمارات.
نحن أول شيء بعيدين عن القوانين والجدال اللي بين الأطراف. نحن أمورنا أسهل كثيراً. نحن أول خطوة بس عشان تبدأ التصوير مثل ما ذكرت فيونا، النص. لازم النص يكون موجود أساسي لتصوير الفيلم. في المجلس الوطني للإعلام إدارة اسمها إدارة متابعة المحتوى الإعلامي، هي المسؤولة عن موافقات النصوص السينمائية. الخطوة الأولى أي شخص بيقدم ترخيص تصريح تصوير نطلب منه موافقة النص السينمائي من إدارة المحتوى. الإشكالية اللي يقولون عليها بخصوص الحقوق الملكية الفكرية، هذه ممكن الشخص يسجلها في وزارة الاقتصاد، ولكن نحن غير معنيين إذا جاء واحد بعد فترة قال هذا النص لي أنا أو لي هذا اختصاص. يعني مثل ما قالت ما تقدر يعني مو بشغلتنا أو مو بتخصصنا أن نقول هذا النص لك أو مو بلك بناء على الورقة اللي من الحقوق الملكية. تمشي أمور النص السينمائي. توفر النص السينمائي نبدأ إلى خطوات التصوير. خطوات التصوير نحن عندنا طبعا نظام إلكتروني، الشخص اللي بيصور هو يقدم على تصريح التصوير. نحن نحتاج فريق عمل التصوير طبعا من إخراج أو فريق اللي راح يكون مصورين في أرض الحدث في مكان التصوير. أحتاج إلى اللوكيشنات تحديدا بالتفصيل للنقطة اللي أنت ذكرتيها. في أماكن عامة تصريحها مباشرة من المجلس الوطني للإعلام، في أماكن عامة تكون ملكية خاصة لا تحتاج إلى تصريح المجلس الوطني العام، وفي أماكن خاصة ولكن تحتاج الجهة تطلب تصريح المجلس الوطني للإعلام إذا كانت مشتركة. أذكر على سبيل المثال جامع الشيخ زايد، تصريح خاص من جامع الشيخ زايد، ولكن حتى تأخذ تصريح التصوير يتطلب تصريح المجلس الوطني للإعلام. متحف اللوفر يتطلب تصريح حتى يقومون هم بالإجراءات. فبعض الأمور مثل أنا أعطيك تصريح المجلس للجامع الشيخ زايد، ولكن هم لهم الجهة المخصصة أين أماكن التصوير في داخل الجامع. في أماكن مثلا ما تتطلب ملك خاص، خلينا الجهات الحكومية أنا ما أقدر أعطي أمر تصوير أو تصريح تصوير لأي دائرة حكومية، هذا يرجع للدائرة الحكومية، لأن صحيح أنها مكان حكومي ولكن ملك لهذه الجهة. أنا ما أستطيع أطلع لأي شخص أقول له لك الحقيقة تصور في وزارة الثقافة أو تصور في وزارة التسامح، لازم تكون ينسق مع الجهة الداخلية في الأماكن. طبعا التصوير متاح في كل مكان في الإمارات، سواء كان أماكن عامة أو أماكن خاصة. الخاصة مباشرة ملك أشخاص هذه نحن ما لنا علاقة فيها، ترجع لصاحب المكان. على سبيل المثال بتصور في فيلا لشخص ما، بتصور في مطعم لشخص ما، هذا يرجع بينك وبين صاحب الملك. ولكن بصفة عامة الأماكن العامة، ولكن نحن نطلب من الأشخاص اللي بيصورون أن يقدمون قبل الوقت الكافي، لأن نحن في عندنا إجراءات مع جهات حكومية أخرى. يعني يمر علينا شخص اليوم يقول أنا أريد أصور بكرة، صعب جدا، يعني صعب جدا، لأن فيها نتطلب بعض الموافقات، التواصل مع الجهات الأخرى. في بعض الجهات يكون تواصلها عن طريق المجلس الوطني للإعلام، مثلا بعض الأماكن هي نتكلم مثل تحتاج أمور ثانية، يعني يقول لك أنا أريد أصور في مثلا أمور تابعة لوزارات أخرى، فنحن نحتاج تواصل، فمن الصعب أن تكلمني اليوم وأعطيك الموافقة في اليوم التالي. فنحن دائما نفضل من الأشخاص أن يعطون 10 أيام أو أسبوعين قبل التصوير، حتى يكون هو في السيف سايد، يكون أموره طيبة وما نتأخر عليه.
I just wanted to add on location releases, because it is an area where I find that filmmakers can be a little soft sometimes. We were shooting a film quite a few years ago now, and they had agreement on the location. They'd gone in and they'd shot at the location, but they hadn't got the signed location release back. They just hadn't picked it up. They were busy. And when they did get it back, the lady whose property it was had added a few little handwritten amendments, which is normally not a problem, but in this case, she insisted that she wanted tickets to the opening party for the film in every location everywhere in the world, including first-class return flights for her and her husband. Now, we had already shot there, so we had to go into a very quick meltdown negotiation to try and get her to understand that that was not available to her and her husband just because we shot in the lounge room one day. So it is really important to be clear with people about what they're going to get when you shoot in their houses. People can be a little bit, they can be brave with their suggestions.
So let's move to the second level. So there is a filmmaker who basically have his or her agreement set in terms of writing, producing, the main team. And now they want to co-produce with another country, okay? So they get $15,000 from here, another 10 from there, and they are collecting monies from funds from all over the world. And while signing these agreements, maybe not looking into the details, there's a lot of responsibility. This money is not free money, right? And they end up at the end with no rights, almost no rights to their own film because of their dependence on these funds. Is there a way that the filmmaker can plan with a lawyer the co-production possibilities in advance and look into, for example, would a lawyer be looking into the different rules in different countries to help the producer design, for example, their strategy? Or would you think that this is something that is purely the job of the producer?
We can help, but I don't think you can afford that. Love you all, but all that information is readily available to most of the websites, and generally what happens is you'll bring that contract to me. It'll be issued by the government authority in whatever country that you're getting your funding from, and I'll read it and go through and redline all the stuff that's going to scare you. That's generally what I will do.
In terms of funding, so you're talking about after production?
No, I'm talking about the financing of the film, having several co-production agreements with other parties that gives them rights. So how do we, just to give some tips for upcoming filmmakers about how to think about these kinds of relationships?
Right, well, I would say that the most important thing to think about is if you are not going to, whatever funding agreement you have is to read it very carefully, because usually, I mean, I would say every place has different rules, but I mean, generally, so whoever pays for the film is going to own that film, and they're going to, so it's something to bear in mind. What kind of control do you want when it comes to distribution? When somebody pays for a film, the type of things that you really should look out for, this is for writers, I guess, as well as any directors or producers, but the type of thing that you should look out for is who owns the film, who's going to be in charge of the distribution of the film. If you own the film, maybe in that first funding agreement that you're going to give a license for them to distribute. This happens a lot with us at Image Nation. We have a lot of the leadership ask us to make a film. They own it, but we have full license of full distribution. So it depends which is more advantageous for you. Ownership isn't necessarily an advantageous for you as a director. There might be that the person who's funding it has a bigger network or a wider network to distribute it and get it out there. Then you just really have to make sure you negotiate a great director's fee for yourself to get paid, or a great producer's fee to get paid. So I do think it's important to bring in a lawyer at that stage, actually, because you don't want any surprises later on. Writers, exactly as Fiona was saying, who's going to do the rewrites, credits, who's going to get the credit, is the most important thing for you to build up your IMDb and get those credits. Then you have to make sure in your agreement that your credit isn't going to be taken away, because if somebody else owns it, they might have full rights to those full credits and they might be able to take your name away. So and what name do you want on your credit, and when do you want it to appear in the credits? There's many things people should think about when they're going into getting money from even with the grants. You will find that from festivals, they will say we need a placement at this position. I need the name card of the grant has to be the second name card that comes up, or the first card that comes up, and you can't contradict, right? Because you might get a grant from one place that says we have to be number one, and then you might get a grant from somebody else that says we have to be number one. So these are all things you have to negotiate in the fundraising process.
Absolutely. I think if you've got to have multiple fundraisers coming into a project, again, a really practical suggestion to make a matrix from day one, so you can work out the credit placements for everybody. And the waterfall, people do mess up their waterfalls really badly by just not thinking about the fact that when I add another funder, where are they going in? I mean, are they going in before that one or after that one when it comes to the waterfall at the end? And just to be very clear about who owns what, I have actually worked on a film where they gave away 110%. So every time the film played, the producer had to dip into their pocket. It was a very difficult legal position to deal with. So just be really careful about these things. Read it and give yourself a really good summary of what's in each and every one of those agreements.
So تفضل.
بس نحن عندنا إضافة في نقطة التوزيع. بالنسبة للأفلام التي تصور في الإمارات، بعد ما يكون انتهى تصويرها يأتي المخرج أو المنتج لتوزيعها في دور السينما. ممكن مثل ما ذكرت نحن نتطلب رخصة لموزع أفلام، يعني ليس أي شخص أو منتج يقدر يوزع أفلامه، يجب أن يكون شخص حاصل على رخصة توزيع أفلام سينمائية في دور السينما. هذا طبعاً الجزئية العقد بين المخرج وشركة التوزيع، هذه تدخل فيها الأمور القانونية وكيف توزيع العقود، ولكن حتى يوزع في دور السينما لازم يكون له رخصة توزيع، أنه له الحقوق في السينما في الإمارات ودول الخليج، أيضا ممكن خارج دول الخليج بناء على رغبة المنتج أو المخرج مع شركة التوزيع. الجزئية اللي عندنا في المجلس الوطني للإعلام، نحن ما نعطي لأي شركة توزيع أفلام موافقة التوزيع إذا ما كان عنده شرط أساسي أنه عنده حقوق ملكية من المنتج أو المخرج، أن له الصلاحية لهذه الشركة أن تقوم بالتوزيع الفيلمي في الإمارات ودول الخليج. على نقطة التمويل، نحن في المجلس الوطني ما في تمويل، ولكن دعما لصناع الأفلام تم يعني إلغاء الرسوم. يعني نحن عندنا رسوم التصوير 500 درهم لكل يوم، لكن لصانع الأفلام إذا كان لديه شركة إنتاج سينمائي رخصة إنتاج سينمائية صادرة من المجلس الوطني للإعلام، لا يتطلب عليه أي رسوم للتصوير، لأنه أصلاً عنده رخصة إنتاج سينمائي. بطبيعة الحال هدف هذه الرخصة ممارسة التصوير وإعداد الأفلام، فبالتالي بما أن مالك الرخصة السينمائية لا يتطلب عليه رسوم تصوير. هذا دعم لصناعة الأفلام والتسهيل. ففقط اللي راح يتطلب تصوير اللي ما عنده رخصة كفرد أو كجهة ما لها علاقة كجهة أخرى. فنحن يعني دائما كنا نقول رخصة إنتاج سينمائي لا، مش كلمة إعفاء عشان لا تفهم غلط، هي مش إعفاء، لكن بما أنك حاصل على رخصة إنتاج سينمائي فتصريح التصوير متاح لك يعني.
هلا we're going to move to post-production, and the filmmaker is in the editing room wanting to add this crucial song that is written in the script for Fayrouz, and of course he doesn't have, or she doesn't have that. And it's, or this footage from this black and white Egyptian film that for the filmmaker is essential to tell the story, okay?
It's always essential for the filmmaker.
To just, there is a myth. I'm not sure if it's a myth, so I'm going to ask you if it's a myth or if it's really legal, that filmmakers, some Arab filmmakers use, that if you use 20 seconds of uncopyrighted music or movie, you have the right to use it and it's legal. So clarify the myth, please.
Sorry, guys. No, 20 seconds, 20%, less than 5%. I've heard it all. I have heard it all. When it comes to analysing whether or not you have infringed on somebody's rights in their copyright work, the court is going to look at various things, and it will vary from country to country. But if you're going to take the US, for example, they're not just going to look at how much you use, they're going to look at the quality of what you used. So if you think about, my favourite one is the Rolling Stones when they sued that band, the Verve, for that song. They only used, I think it was 8 bars of the song, and they used it repeated all the way through. So they used 8 bars. I mean, that's not very much of the song. But when the judge looked at the song, he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, he basically said that if that part of that Rolling Stone song was not in the Verve song would have been rubbish and wouldn't have made any money. And they looked at the quality of what was taken and the quality of what it added to the final product. So you have to be really careful about just saying you can't quantify copyright breach, is what I'm saying here. So no, myth, myth, myth.
Hana is going to show us a case study of a film documentary project that they worked on in Image Nation to talk about the use of archival footage and so on. So would you like to maybe just give us a little introduction? If you give us a little introduction.
Okay, this is a film we did at Image Nation a few years ago. It's called Anwar Roma, Lights of Rome. This was a film that we went in, basically it's a documentary that we felt was important to capture a piece of history that not many people know about. Not many people know that in 1990 the UAE qualified for the World Cup and hasn't since, unfortunately. At the time, the country was very young, and the idea of the UAE going into the World Cup seemed, even to the players, completely, it just felt like a dream far away. And the players that were there, a lot of them even had other jobs at the time. You think about the professional football industry, it's pumped full of money, not just in all around the world, but at the time it was a very young country, and some of the players were lawyers, some of the players were policemen, so the passion that they had for the sport was outstanding, to the point where it got them to the World Cup, and they played against Goliaths like Germany and Colombia, and but they did such an amazing job, and it's a moment of pride, I feel, for the country. So we were very, very happy to do this film. But I'll tell you what, as a producer, I had no idea what sports and music archive would do. So anyway, maybe you can show that.
قبل قيام الاتحاد أيضا كانت الحياة بسيطة. مارسنا كرة القدم معرفة حقيقية.
واحد يرفع الكندورة يعني ويلعب فيها يعني زي الكندورة يعني.
ولا أنا أتحدى كائن من كان في ذلك الوقت أنه وضع احتمال نسبته 1% أن منتخب الإمارات سيتأهل لكأس العالم.
لكن لما أجت الرغبة في أن يكون في منتخب، تم تجميع المنتخب بعناصر من كل الإمارات.
أتمنى متى أكبر، أتمنى متى أوصل،
لأن كان عندهم الرغبة والأمل في أن هذا الاتحاد هو كيانهم، هو حياتهم المستقبلية.
The 14th FIFA World Cup competition Italy.
فريق مغمور جاي، فكنا محتاجين أن نفوز 2-0 على أساس أن نتأهل.
There's a great chance here for them now. Oh my goodness me! والله قاعد أشوف أنوار روما الآن.
نزلنا في مطار روما.
The first time they've ever qualified for the World Cup.
يعني غنى وتطبيل
وأعلام الإمارات في كل مكان.
نفس الفترة اللي نحن بعدها بسنة اللي صعدنا كأس العالم في سنغافورة.
Away we go then. What an incredible finale.
يعني ما ننسى هذا الشيء يعني هذاك اليوم.
عمر طويل، الواحد في تاريخه في نفسه محفور، ما تقدر حد يقدر يشيلها من نفس الواحد.
So with Anwar Roma, it was, in general, archive documentaries. When I was saying the 1.5% to 2% for your legal fees, if you're talking about an archive documentary and you're talking about sports archive specifically and music, you know, your budget's poof, it's gone up.
We'll take 50.
So it's everybody, you know, thinks documentary archive. It could be a wonderful thing. It is a dangerous area to go to if you don't have those kind of budgets. The other thing I think everybody should consider if they want to go and do an archive documentary is to really think about time. It's not clear cut. When you delve into the world of archive, you are going into a very dark pool of history that is region specific, and it is, I would describe it as a journey. Uncovering who owns the rights to archive takes a lot of time, and it's usually not just one person actually who owns the rights to archive. So I'll give you an example for this film. Things like, okay, you want to get some archive of the 1980s Abu Dhabi. You're looking around, some global, you know, big libraries might have something like AP, Associated Press. Very easy to go through their archive libraries, very easy to select. You get the deal, you say, okay. Again, with archive, it's very important to know where you want your film to go, because you can save a hell of a lot of money if you're going to say, do you know what, I only want international for a short period of time, but then I just want it to be regional in perpetuity, right? You could do that. Or you could say, do 2 cuts. And you can do one international cut that you're going to do for a very short period of time. And then you can have another cut where you're taking out some of the very expensive international archive rights and just having them Middle East only and having that in perpetuity in all formats. So there's different things you can do that can help you save money when you're picking your archive. And then when you're going to a library like Associated Press, I would always recommend, or always recommend having a lawyer to read those contracts with you, not alone, but with you, because those agreements, a lot of the time, these archive libraries, they'll give you a fee and an agreement for you to sign that will say, okay, you can have an access fee, but they don't necessarily own the copyright. And therefore, you have to find out, they usually tell you with AP, but you have to find out who the copyright owner is. So, for example, on one of our football scenes here, or one of our pieces of archive, AP owned the footage, and they could give us the high-resolution footage, but then we had to go to a TV station in Singapore to get the signatures of the licensing of the copyright. So there's the double-edged thing. The same happens with music, and music's a whole world, which I'm sure Fiona can talk much better about than I can. But it's with this film, we wanted to be very regionally specific and accurate in our documentary. So the music is really from the region. It comes, the songs start from the 1960s, and kind of in the 80s is when we stop. Now, where do you get music from? And the rights to music from this area, it's not easy. It takes time, because you can go and find, there's things called publishing rights. Right? There's somebody who wrote the piece of music isn't necessarily the person who performed the piece of music that you're going to use. So there's two sets of rights that you need to get there. We have a song in here called Ana Khaliji. It's a song that was performed by the Kuwait TV Orchestra in the late 1980s. So Kuwait TV have it, but they didn't write it. So Kuwait TV can go and sign for their orchestra and say, here, you have the rights to use this piece of music. Here's the footage, and you have the music. But somebody else, and his name was Sulaiman Al-Maghroug, he wrote it. He wrote the song. Now, finding him wasn't easy. So what you might want to consider if you're doing an archive documentary is getting an archive producer, because an archive producer is somebody who is really dedicated to researching and finding, and which, like I said, it's a journey to find these people who need to sign. But also a music supervisor might be something people want to consider. A music supervisor is somebody who needs to understand the creative of your film, can give you ideas of music that would fit into your film, be it time specific or region specific, but can also help you negotiate those rights and find those people. So we used a company in this called Pop Arabia who helped us find. And as a director, you really need to be willing to replace things when you enter an archive film. If I always say to people, if you're doing an archive film, you not only want the piece that you definitely want, but you need 3 other solutions. Otherwise, you're adding another 7 months for one little clip before your film can come out. So these are all things to think about. Yeah, that's the main thing.
I'm just going to jump in here about music in particular. Music is a bit of a minefield because of the multiple rights that are involved, and they can be quite difficult to clear. And a lot of times people don't want their music in your films, and it's very hard to convince them otherwise. Be careful of editors and directors who find free music sites. There's a lot of bait and switch going on, particularly out of the US at the moment with music, so they will have a great big free on that front page, but actually it's free for non-commercial use, and if you use it commercially in any way, you will receive a massive bill, and by massive, I mean just keep adding zeros, because as far as they're concerned, you didn't have those rights. The free is only in relation to non-commercial use, and you're obviously going to be commercial. Music publishing rights are very, very expensive to get and can be, again, quite multi-layered. You often have more than one publisher. There are some really good websites for finding out who owns music, though. They're not available here. You kind of have to go and dive into places like the weird Australian copyright registry. They have lots of stuff there, and there's one in the UK. So you just have to do a little bit of research, which is why, as Hannah said, a music supervisor is a great idea if you want to focus on actually making your film and not diving around databases for a couple of months.
ناصر، بدي ارجع لموضوع التوزيع، وهو هذا رح يكون السؤال الاخير قبل ما نفتح المجال للجمهور. فيلم انعمل وجاهز وبده ينعرض بالامارات، شو هي معايير خلينا نقول الرقابه اللي ممكن تسمح لفيلم انه ينعرض، وبرضه ممكن تسمح او ما ينعرض، او تسمح لفيلم انه يتصور او ما يتصور؟
ما في مثلا فيلم مثلا ما ينعرض، بس في مثلا نحن في معايير. هي مثلا في قوانين مجلس الوطني للاعلام تقريبا 11 معيار. نحن قبل كتابه النص او مع كتابه النص نعطيهم اياه، يعني ان هذه في معايير اساسيه هي معروفه يمكن في كل مكان في العالم: عدم الاساءه للاديان، عدم الاساءه لرئيس الدوله، يعني هذه المعايير الاساسيه. لكن انه ينعرض الفيلم ما ينعرض، ما في ما ينعرض، ولكن في تحديد فئات عمريه. يعني بهالفئة أنا أسمعها هذه لعامة الناس، هذه ما يدخل الأطفال إلا مع أولياء الأمور، هذا يكون 13 سنة، هذا يكون 15 سنة. والآن في الفترة الأخيرة تمنا إضافة 21 سنة ما فوق، اللي هي الأشياء اللي مثلا لا تصلح للعامة ولكن فقط لل 21 سنة وما فوق أضيفت في الفترة الأخيرة. فالأفلام اللي إذا بتصور مثلا داخل الإمارات من السهولة مثلا تنسق معاه، لأن عنده كتابة النص تعطيه بعض الشغلات اللي يلتزم فيها. الأفلام اللي تأتي من الخارج يعني نتعامل معها بتحديد الفئة العمرية. وطبعا حاليا صار يعني من خبرات السنين في شركات التوزيع تعرف الأفلام اللي يعني أو شو هو المسموح أو اللي ينعرض في الإمارات، ولكن ما في شيء اسمه مثلا ممنوع أو لا، في تحديد فئات. يعني أنا أحدد لك الفئة العمرية اللي يناسب الفيلم يعني.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very exciting and much needed topic that can last for hours and hours and hours. But I would like to now open the floor for the audience to ask. You have free consultation of a lawyer that you won't have always. So just ask your questions.
Hello. What is the difference between found footage and archival footage within the artistic freedom context?
Sorry, I didn't hear you well. What's the difference?
What is the difference between found footage and archival footage and archival material within the artistic freedom context?
Do you want to tell us what you think found footage is?
Very literally, footage that you find, say, on YouTube.
That's not found footage.
That's exactly my point.
That's just someone else that's breached someone else's copyright.
But within the artistic freedom context, what does that mean? Is there a difference at all?
Copyright doesn't recognise artistic freedom. It doesn't. And I think if you're going to think about using someone else's vision in your project, think about how you would feel if it was your vision and they were using it in their project without your permission. I always say to people, if you think that it's okay, then think about how you would feel if it was your vision. Because this is where people suddenly go, oh, Fiona, they've stolen 30 seconds of my film and didn't pay for it. It's like, well, so did you. So do think, found vision is not a thing. Public domain doesn't mean I found it on a public internet. Public domain means that it's expired. It means that, and this year is a great year for us as filmmakers. I'm not a filmmaker, but I feel like one of you today. Because an awful lot of stuff has just fallen into public domain in the US because the Sonny Bono Act just expired. So on the 1st of Jan, piles and piles of stuff has just fallen into public domain. You watch and see the Jane Austen adaptations will be flowing from now on. So do be very careful. That's what it means. Artistic, if you're going to try and rely on any exception to copyright, you need to be very careful about how you apply that. In the UAE, there are very limited fair dealing or fair use exemptions. There are more in the States, but you're not in the States. So be very, very careful about that. So ultimately, if you're using someone else's stuff, you need to ask them and you may need to pay for it. And if you don't ask them now, I can guarantee they're going to come and see me and I'm going to send you a bill.
Please.
I had a question regarding the use of archival footage in the development of a nonprofit type of project, type of film, something that would be possibly disseminated online for free. That I know that in the United States, in general, there's the whole Fair Use Act. I don't know the specifics of that and whether that you have protection there, but I'm just wondering, like in dealing with other archival footage outside the US, what are maybe some of the experiences and other information that you might have regarding that? Whether, a project is protected because it's nonprofit, or does that even matter?
I can't really talk for the UAE because we don't have a lot of copyright litigation here. We have a lot of people who settle so that they don't have to go to court, and they end up settling by paying. That's normally how that works. In the US, they will consider what you have done to the commercial value of the original work in stealing it. That will be a consideration. But if you're going to develop a not-for-profit project using third-party material, I would strongly recommend that you let people know that you're doing that with their material. If they say no, go to plan B, because sometimes people don't want to be associated with your non-profit. Sometimes you're doing something with their material that they don't like, don't want, or they have similar plans themselves, and you're going to ruin what they're planning on doing. But ultimately, it's their material. They get to decide what you do with it. You don't get to decide what you do with it, and that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, the only thing I would add to that is, I go on the very cautious side with these things, but I would suggest that everybody likes publicity. I was speaking to a video artist who was here yesterday, and he was saying he got discovered. He didn't think he was big enough to anyone to see that he was using somebody else's material. He got discovered, and really only the person who owned the material only really wanted notification. People like to know where their work is going, you know. Maybe with your non-profit, you can give publicity, or you're showing that somebody, an entity, is supporting you. Maybe, go in there in the first place and say, "Can you support me by giving me your archival material for free?" So I would never shy away and think you're stealing, because content should live and content should evolve, and as long as you're giving the right platform for these people, hopefully they should, it sounds like you're doing a non-profit, so it's for a good cause. It should be good publicity for them.
And of course, credits. Like, if they agree, you have to always credit them. And
people love credits. Love them.
One more question. Do we have time for one more
question? I was wondering, this area about found footage is a bit grey, perhaps, but what if I wanted to make a remake of a film?
Worse. You can't just make a remake without, unless it's something that is in public domain. You can do whatever you like with something that's in public domain, like as in the author died 80 years ago or more, or whatever the particular rule is for that piece of work. You can't just remake things without asking people first. That's actually a really bad infringement of their copyright. And if you think about it, as a creator, you when you make something, you don't want, if someone's going to remake it, you want to be involved in that process, because this is your baby. And whether it's small filmmakers or large studios, they all have the same view about remakes. They have a massive commercial appeal as well, so people do protect those.
I'm sorry, we have to close the session. Thank you very much for your presence and for your valuable information. And